Welcome, everyone, to the Mornings on Main Building Strong Property Owner and Business Owner Relationships. Welcome to those of you participating live with us and those also that are watching this later on YouTube. All of our webinars have been archived on YouTube. It's crazy to think that we've been doing this since the pandemic started in 2020. Joy, we used to do these weekly. It's hard to believe. Um,
Ambitious.
Yes, but we weren't doing anything else.
Yeah.
So that was the thing we were doing. But so we have a huge library of videos for you guys to use as you're developing and doing your great work in downtowns. So we have Joy here today. I have spent a lot of time with Joy this first quarter already. Her and I visited 8 different Main Street communities the beginning of the year doing on-site visits, on-site assessments, some accreditation visits. And so we get to spend a lot of time chit-chatting. And so, dealing with property owners and business owners is part of what we do in the Main Street world. And so when this topic came up, I knew Joy was the person to tap into for this because she is both of those. And I'm sure she's going to talk a little bit about that through this presentation. But Joy, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Keith. Well, yes, as Keith said, I'm Joi Cuartero Austin. I'm one of the senior program officers for Main Street America. So for those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, the senior program officer, really, again, just kind of fancy for I get to work with this wonderful network. So whether it's in Missouri Main Street or those across the Main Street America network, do a lot of things like the assessments, also sometimes strategy identification. But a lot of my focus is, with small business owners, with property owners, and that is because, yes, I am both of those things. But I also started as a Main Street director, a community called Batavia in Illinois. I am actually based out of a community called Quincy, Illinois. It's actually on the Mississippi River. I actually border Missouri, so I get to hang out in Missouri quite a bit on a personal level as well. And I actually did economic development for where I live now for a number of years before kind of coming back into Main Street. So that's just a little bit about me. So this is really exciting that I get to talk to you all about building these relationships. I think it's very important to do so because, in the end, that's just a big part, I think, of our role as Main Streeters in the end is just how we're able to really move forward a lot of that vitality in our downtowns because we are working with those small business owners and those property owners so much. So we'll just kind of jump right in. All right. So when we think about that, I think it's just such a critical ingredient, right? In terms of vitality is just building those relationships. They're kind of everything that shapes, occupancy, the reinvestment, retention, recruitment, long-term success in the end. So we're really going to explore some of those practical ways I think that you all as Main Street programs can really kind of think about success today in terms of, again, what does it mean to sort of like build some of those relationships and talk to some of those stakeholders and really align some of those goals? Because sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to think about what it means to align both businesses and property owners together. And then, of course, all those other stakeholders and make sure that everybody is on the same page about those things. So Keith kind of mentioned we spent a lot of time together, so you'll see a couple of those photos in here. But I think again, when it comes to your districts, it can be kind of complicated, those relationships, right? So we want to make sure that Main Street districts really thrive when these groups are, operating, together because they are sometimes separate lanes. Instead, we want to make sure that they're seeing themselves as partners, again, really kind of shaping the health of your district. Business owners, they really bring energy and activity and jobs and the customer experience in the end. They're really representing your district. Property owners, they really are the ones that are helping to shape spaces and the conditions of those buildings, those lease structures. Sometimes it's about, again, that long-term investment patterns that can happen and, again, make business, I think, possible. So when those relationships between property owners and business owners are strong, your districts end up becoming so much more resilient. So those spaces end up being filled faster. Those investments are a little bit more strategic, especially when everyone's on the same page. I think tenants also stay a lot longer. You see a lot of newer entrepreneurs. Come in and there's just more of a pathway in the end. So again, I think that's why it's so important to build those strong relationships, because when those relationships are weaker, then we do start to see maybe more of that vacancy or just like some frustration overall. And then things can tend to get a little bit more stalled because folks are not maybe realizing, what it takes again, because there's some misalignment around how folks see the district. So I think that's where you all, as Main Streeters, really can play such a powerful role because you can really be that connector, that convener, and again, that advocate. So want to take you a little bit to, I was saying I was in traditional economic development before. So oftentimes this is just like a very short list of things that we talk about a lot in traditional economic development, right? So attraction, retention, expansion, workforce development, some of the infrastructure and site development, tourism. And I think that sometimes we as Main Streeters don't always maybe see ourselves in some of this language that gets used in traditional economic development. But I do want to point out that there's a huge role that Main Street plays in all of these things, and what that connection can be when you're kind of thinking about your role in general, but maybe how to sort of like think about what that kind of means because it's so much broader than maybe events and promotions or sometimes we kind of get stuck in maybe like just preservation lane or those types of things, right? So I think at your best, Main Street communities really, again, you're strengthening the local economy. Again, it's market driven, right? You really are working on business retention and development strategies. You're also attracting investment. You are supporting redevelopment. You are the ones that help align what happens downtown in terms of like uses and community goals. So think about that economic vitality framework. And I think it's like really clear that it is about developing entrepreneurs, and that definitely includes property owners, and how those uses are happening within those spaces. So I think that framing really matters because again, property owners, they shouldn't really be, separate from like kind of what you think about with economic development in general. In many ways, they are small business owners as well. So the way that you kind of think about cultivating your small business owners are the same way I think that you should be thinking about cultivating property owners, because they're making those same kinds of investment decisions. They're also managing risk. They're also navigating finances and responding to a lot of regulatory pieces. And, again, they're trying to sustain this particular asset over time. So just kind of think about the way that you're, can translate, I think, sort of traditional economic development into the things that you all do as Main Streeters. So again, when you're thinking about how you strengthen your district, we're not just supporting the merchants, we're also supporting the people who own and improve and, lease and do the types of improvements to all of those physical spaces that really, again, shape, I think, your downtown community. So just kind of think about those things when you think about your role. So in terms of kind of like, some of the steps, I think we need to really definitely think about understanding some of the partners and maybe why things might be a little tense at times, right? It's because relationships, I think, can be a little bit difficult between sometimes owners and business, property owners and business owners, especially if they are not one and the same, because sometimes the perspective can be a little bit different. So business owners, they might be worried specifically about maybe sales, staffing, rent, their visibility, repairs, and customer traffic, let's say. Whereas property owners, maybe they're thinking about like insurance and taxes and code requirements and rehab costs or like contractors. Man, I think about my spaces in general, contractors, sometimes they're booked out for months and months, and I can't get one to come into the spaces. Or maybe it's just like the financing to get things done, or just the risk, honestly, of the different tenants that come through. So, there's just a lot of different reasons why both business owners and property owners, worry about the things that are going on with a space. So I think that it's kind of like having that understanding so that we can get them a little bit closer to find the commonality and then figure out what that sort of shared vision is. The other thing that I think that is important is that, we have a lot of things around vacancy and we talk about it a ton, but we don't always really get to sometimes the root cause of what vacancy is. And I'm going to kind of maybe whip through some of these slides a little bit, although I feel like we could spend so much time talking about understanding vacancy because this is, I think, just like a core of also what it means when we're trying to build these relationships and sort of put ourselves in a more like empathetic space for both our business owners and our property owners. And to some extent, a lot of our other stakeholders, because this is a lot of the times what they're asking us to help them with is to really figure out what is our vacancy challenge, right? My colleague Shane and I, we did this spotlight, and I'm not sure if folks there have been able to read this, but it's, something that kind of really showcased that vacancy is rarely caused by just one thing. It's often a combination of many different things. And we'll kind of go through a few of those. But when people look at something like what is pictured here, and you kind of understand some of the different perspectives, and you start having some conversations about it, you can really start to view this space through the eyes of that small business owner or that property owner, or again, residents or the city. And you just start to understand that, again, they have different reasons why they think this space might be vacant. And then you can start to maybe get down to what is that actual root cause. And I think that's the part where we really want to acknowledge, like, how can we figure out what that root cause is? So I want to share a couple of things. I said at the beginning that I do a lot of like strategy identification, and with that, we do a lot of information gathering. So I have some things from our survey, excuse me, essentially. So these are just surveys that we kind of take of residents and community members across kind of the network whenever we do some of our strategy identification. So I guess I'll say that for right now, but it is, these are Main Street folks in Main Street communities. So in those surveys, our leadership surveys have said that 22% of Main Street leaders and those who use the districts that they live in said that vacancy was a top concern. And then you can kind of see, we sort of noted there, those like absent property owners or unaffordable spaces, like those are kind of like, I would say, vacancy adjacent concerns. But you can see how this is just a big thing for that folks are really thinking of, that it's really top of mind. And then another thing that we've kind of like pulled from these surveys is 70% of local leaders, report that the lack of built out space also hinders their opportunity for economic development. So, another reason why we really have to start to help our property owners really figure out what it takes to get them to a place where they can really make their spaces something that business owners want to participate in and are able to go into. And then also that there are too many vacant storefronts or lots. This is the second most cited concern in a lot of the surveys that that were taken. And again, these are all from part of our strategy identification surveys, as well as a lot of the leadership surveys that we put out there through Main Street America. So I think that this also means that when a storefront is empty, it's not enough to say, that the owner should be doing better, or we just need more businesses, usually the real answer is just so much more layered than that. So we kind of think, all right, so what do we do about these spaces, right? Um, I think that again, we have to get to the why. Why is this something that is happening? So when we started really kind of discussing this, we really kind of came down to here are some of the most maybe common factors. And again, a lot of this I'm sort of sharing with you quickly so that we can get to a point where how can we sort of feel a little bit more empathetic towards our small business owners and our property owners. But we identify that these are just like recurring factors that we have found are often a common cause. So when we sort of broke it down, here are just a couple of things that we are noting. For if it's about the ownership, some questions that we start to kind of ask ourselves is like, okay, well, who are the owners, and what is it that they're really looking for in these spaces? Do we find out that it was inherited? Is it really that they are maybe out of town? A lot of people say that they report these folks are not very cooperative, but what is that reason for them to not be very cooperative? And then how can we maybe get them to a space where we have that understanding and then can provide them perhaps with more resources, or to have that first step conversation with them, and figure out really what it is. Is it a capacity issue, or is it something else? Is there something that's very personal about that building or that space? But we usually will not find out until we start to have some conversations. If it's a regulatory thing, well, then this is something where we start to really advocate and partner with our municipalities about maybe the tax structure, maybe it's zoning and codes. There's different practices, a lot of things we already have in place. But I understand that sometimes those are capacity challenges for our own communities. So then those are other conversations that we have to ask ourselves as well, in our own communities. But regulatory is definitely something that can happen often and be a common factor. Sometimes it's also a financial challenge, right? Older buildings, lots of different costs, people who don't really know, how to be able to take care of that deferred maintenance that's been happening for a very long time. There's a lot of risk to those things. And not just like on the lending piece of maybe taking care of it. I have found often with deals that I'm getting caught up now with insurance challenges. So that's a whole nother side of things that I didn't realize were going to be an extra barrier. If and when you start talking to your property owners, I should say, when you start talking to your property owners, ask them about those things as well, because it might not just be the capital to purchase or the capital to help invest in a space. It could also be those sort of other things that they need for their building spaces. So those are all challenges that those owners can be facing. And then the market itself, right? So it could be this lower demand for those spaces, but it could also be because of some of those other things. Those spaces are just not quite ready for entrepreneurs to be able to jump into them. It could be that maybe the cultivation of strong entrepreneurs is not quite there yet. So it's a really difficult risk for a property owner to spend a lot of money on a space for entrepreneurs that maybe have not had a great reputation of being strong enough to withstand time in a space. We know that it's hard, business is hard. So, in order for them to last, like, beyond that 3 and 5 year mark, we have to do a lot to make sure that they are strong enough as well. So there's a lot of different kind of things at play, but, making sure that we can match them, those tenants up with the right spaces. I think those are the things that are also very important. So lots of things to think about, right, when it comes to sort of vacancy in general. And this is just one aspect of building that relationship, and having that really good understanding. So, there's lots of questions there about what we do with those vacant spaces. But I think that in general, it's something to think about here is just, what is it truly that's going on with the community? How can we maybe start to see what maybe is there one main challenge, or are there more? But what's the thing that's maybe kind of bubbling up to the top for you all in this moment? Because I think that's maybe where we start. And then you can start to kind of think about, some of those, again, resources, or some of those, ways to kind of work with your city. Again, maybe it's that whole kind of, we talk a lot about the carrot and the stick. What in terms of resources can you offer, but then also how can you work with your city on making sure that the codes and your zoning is appropriate, and that you have folks that can really help tell property owners what they can do with their spaces, so that we have, a really good base to start with. So lots of things to kind of think about there, but and I'll get back to this slide to kind of talk through maybe some other potential ways to kind of see all four of these. But in general, I think that these are definitely questions to potentially ask yourself, and then really kind of start to dig into this piece on vacancies. So this is one section to really kind of start to sink your teeth into. So the next part that I kind of want to talk about is about how you sort of, again, sort of reframe the relationship, because I think when we have a good understanding, I think about the vacancy piece, now we want to sort of talk a little bit about, again, building those relationships with our owners, both the business owners and the property owners. So to me, this really kind of starts, again, going back to what are some of those commonalities, and how can we again help our small business owners maybe even become property owners? I think that's another thing that we want to try to strive for, because then they definitely have an interest in, I think, in with each other. So I often think to myself that there are some decisions that I have made personally as a small business owner that I might not have been able to make had I not owned the building. So, and if you think about the buildings that are in your district, and sort of, the history of them, maybe when they very first were built, you can imagine that a lot of them might have had the owner living on the upstairs while their business was downstairs. And that was sort of typical. And that's just not how it kind of is these days. But that's how it was. And that's what the business model was like. And that was maybe how their business model helped with their own small business, that they owned that building. And I just think that we've gotten away from that practice, and that might be something that we want to really consider, moving forward, is how can we encourage that? It might not always work everywhere all the time, but I think that that's something to consider, because I really do think about that often. Again, there are decisions that I have made personally in my business that I would not be able to have done had I not owned the building. So again, I think useful for you all as Main Street leaders to, again, reframe, I think, these kinds of conversations. And instead of just, thinking about property owners and business owners with opposing interests, how do we help them see these overlaps? Again, both groups benefit from a stronger district. Both really want more foot traffic. Both definitely want buildings to be maintained. They want them to be occupied. They want less risk. They want more predictability. They want better access to resources. They are both also affected by things like local politics or how the district is seen. They're both if you truly have a parking challenge, they are both affected by that. Maybe it's regulatory pieces or how customer behavior is, but both of them are affected by these things. So again, I think you all as Main Streeters are very uniquely positioned, and can help kind of translate between the groups, and help business owners sort of better understand maybe building realities, and maybe investment timelines. And then we can also help property owners better understand today's entrepreneurs and what they really need from a space, or maybe what they really need from a lease structure, and from that like building environment. So the more that you can maybe help them also build some trust and sort of translate between the two, I think that that's also a good way to sort of help build those relationships. So other ways, I think that, this might seem, maybe a little bit common sense, but always be the person that shows up consistently. Again, try to be that connector, not always just a collector. I mean, I know we still need that help from them, but be that person that is that follow through, always transparent about how you're there for them. And then, of course, doing things with them and not just for them, right? Being involving them and engaging them, being able to celebrate them, and then, of course, offering that value is very, very important. So just making sure that these are the consistent things that you're bringing to those owners. And then, of course, I think like as we're building these relationships, they are, of course, about people. And to me, I feel like people are just a little bit messy, right? So it's going to take time. But I think active listening is always kind of an important part. So I want to say that going back to kind of like what pieces of sort of traditional economic development can we bring in into our roles in Main Street? I think it's going to start with sort of what we call like, business retention expansion meetings. So I think this is a great place where we really start to build relationships and start, with sort of this process of listening to what's going on in a business, and but make it more I mean, casual and friendly, but a little bit more formal in terms of like how you are keeping track of the things that you're hearing. So, and essentially being able to, really write these things down and keep track of. It's similar to maybe what you're already doing, let's say in a business survey, but these are more one-on-one visits, right? So have something that kind of guides that conversation, but be able to really define some goals, and then be able to really kind of, again, develop kind of this guide to conduct these types of visits. You can still train a team. So maybe this is like, again, your EV team, maybe also with your design team that are going out and doing these visits. It's still something that I think you can then analyze as you continue to learn, create a work plan, and track some progress. And Keith, I see that you have come on.
Yes, I was hoping you would get to the section. We recommend and promote a annual business visitation, and so I'm dropping in the chat what that looks like. And we actually stole this from Iowa, Main Street. This would be your EV committee going and visiting those businesses within your district on an annual basis. And there's just like 5 or 6 quick, simple questions to ask, but it helps you not only be that collector of information, but then also be the connector because 2 of the questions pertain to how can we help you? And while it's geared towards business owners, you could do the same thing with property owners. So I think it's a really good tool that we recommend that folks do. And I've been saying recently that we need to treat property owners more like business owners. We tend to think of them in one bucket or the other, but how do we help them be successful as a business owner with their property? So I think that's all of these things are good things related to that. So thanks, Joy. I just wanted to interject. We do have a template that you can use for that.
1,000%. Awesome. I love that. Yes, and I am happy to. I have a couple of conversation guides. If you've got one already, perfect. I'm happy to give you mine as well. Maybe there's some things to add. That's awesome. And I'm glad that you're already on that pathway because I do think that is absolutely important. Again, these are very basic questions in terms of, again, asking business owners. But yeah, if you try to start to find out about some of those trends, again, staffing, consumer shifts, building needs, all of those things, it starts to develop a lot of opportunities to, again, better understand what's that alignment between, again, the business owner and their property owner or what have you. Again, maybe it is about, maybe you start to find out again, is it really about the need for better signage or better flexible leases or testing different concepts? A lot of different things that you can start to figure out. And then kind of going back to like even our vacancy conversation, I think that it starts to also, you can start to figure out even those storefronts that are occupied, maybe it's something that is about more like activation and perception than it is about anything else. And I guess I say that because like sometimes places can be occupied, but they don't feel it or they don't look like it. And that is also like a challenge. And people think that things are vacant, even though they're not, right? I think you might hear that all the time as well. So I'm going to show you this slide here. And this was one of the things that my colleague Shane had in one of his projects in a Capitol Hill district. I love this. It says aggressive storefront activation. But do you have occupied storefronts that scream, I'm occupied? You might not, right? So it could just be this thing that people pass by and they have no idea that something's in that space because it doesn't really seem like anything's in there. And some of those other ways to activate a space, right? And we might know this, but when we look at our district with a more critical eye, are we seeing those blade signs? Are we seeing a more transparent window display? Are we seeing like a sandwich board or things that kind of come out, into the sidewalk that kind of showcase, again, that a space has something, within it. So lots of different ways to kind of help our business owners with maybe some of the concerns that we heard because we went and we did these one-on-one visits with them. And then we really understood a little bit more about what's their top concerns and how to kind of help them with them. And then Keith, you brought up property owners. I'm glad that you did, that those questions also help with property owners. And that is very true. A lot of the things that you learn from in terms of those one-on-one visits with business owners can certainly translate to the property owners. I know some of the challenges is, sometimes we don't know who they are, or we don't always have that chance to either meet with them or they don't answer as often. But I think that's the part about, again, building that relationship, because that property owner conversation is also very important, because we want to know like what drew them to either invest in the downtown in the first place, or again, why they own the building in general. What are some of those challenges that they're facing in owning and maintaining that property? Are there other major repairs or code issues that need attention, et cetera? So, how do we help them find those tenants, that kind of thing?
So, Joy, I know that a lot of folks are probably thinking this before they even type the question, so I'm going to ask it just right
Yeah,
here because this seems like the perfect place for it, unless you have a slide for it coming up. But
maybe.
what are some tactics or strategies for reaching property owners that don't live in the community, have been neglecting their buildings? What are some things maybe that you've heard or dealt with um, to get their attention?
Yeah, so we do talk about that often. In the end, there are some of those carrot and stick, scenarios. Oftentimes, we do have to work with our municipality on providing those types of resources. So in the end, we have had quite a few folks that have started to roll out vacancy ordinances that start to, because that is another communication point that starts to talk to owners a little bit more about what it takes to get their properties up to a certain point. The vacancy ordinances also come sometimes with like escalating tax implications or fees or fines that then can, start a conversation. But they also come with the resources on the back end to kind of help, alleviate, what that particular, fine or something might be. So, but it does kind of at least help trigger an opportunity to at least get them to the table to talk about it. So, if we're not trying to help them to at least get their spaces to a certain point, or at least have that first conversation, I think that's the thing that we have to do is like, we're not trying to tell you what to do with the spaces, but we want to tell you what you can do. So
Mhm.
how can we get you at least to the table to talk about it first? And then like, let's help you get there. And if you're not interested at all in doing those things, that's fine, but maybe we need to help you sell it then.
Mhm.
So those are some of the ways that we've been trying to, get folks to the table.
Right. Yeah. And I think, a lot of times I hear folks, it depends upon somebody in the community might have a connection to them. It's, the right person also to reach out to start that conversation. And sometimes it does have to be the city with some sort of, as you mentioned, stick, maybe some sort of infraction or citation to get their attention to bring them to the table so that you can have that conversation. So that's where
Yeah, yeah.
partners become important.
Exactly. And yes, sometimes you do need to have that right person. So if you can find that relationship within your community, that's wonderful. It doesn't always have to be you that is the person
Hmm.
that does it, but
Right.
who's that particular pipeline of folks. But yeah, I think that, again, many of us think that we're trying to tell them again what they can't do.
Hmm.
Rather, let's make it what we are telling them they can do.
Right.
Um, we talk about, oh, well, actually, here we show them the pretty picture, right? And oftentimes they'll choose a pretty picture.
Hmm.
So, but how can we show that to them so that they know? And I think that that's kind of important. Or, I've been using this example also in terms of what property owners can do. I think we just have to be a little bit more explicit about what it is that we want in our districts. A lot of these things live in our minds. We know exactly that this building would be the perfect X, Y, and Z coffee shop, brewery, bookstore, those things that we absolutely know will be so successful because our community has told us so. We have the data for it. You can see here on the left, and I apologize for the glare, but it says outdoor gear, apparel store, bodega, convenience store, farmers market, brewery, distillery, etc. So they know those potential uses. They've got the square footage on the ground floor, second floor, basement. The unique feature for this particular building is a garage entrance. So they were just telling people that this space can do these things. And then on the right-hand side, they've got like a facade rendering, but then they actually have layouts. And these are not like architecturally stamped or anything. So, they might not pass that exact muster, but they certainly can get a property owner or even a business owner just to that next phase. And now you're really kind of helping people align with your vision. So just ways to kind of get both business owners and property owners just a little bit further to that vision of your ideal
Hmm.
downtown.
Yeah, we worked with a couple communities that were really struggling with. You mentioned that in an earlier slide too about spaces that are ready, move-in ready. And so we worked with a community that had very little of that, but they changed their verbiage that they were marketing first, those places that they're saying were rent ready. And so putting more emphasis on, hey, if you get your space ready to go, we'll help market it for you, but it has to be to a certain point before we're going to feature or highlight those properties.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great incentive, right? Just tell them exactly what you would like from them. And that's another way, I think, to get them to the table because I think then they're sitting there saying, well, why not me? Well, here's a checklist of things that we would really love from you. And once you get there, or once you've like kind of white boxed your space, or maybe if you've gotten it to code compliance or whatever you really need from them. And maybe the point is that we need you to code compliance, but then on the back end, the city will
Mhm.
help pay for those things. I think that's another part of it. So again, working with your municipality on like what does it cost to get to that. But I think and then if you're worried that you don't know, what it does take, so that's your next EV committee person that you maybe won't need to go for, is to
Right.
get someone on your committee that might help shape what that program might look like.
Joy,
So.
would you explain what white box ready means? Some folks may
Oh,
not know that term.
yeah, so white box ready maybe just means like ready for what your small businesses might need to actually be move-in ready. So, that they really have taken care of. Maybe it's an updated electrical piece. Maybe there's like, HVAC challenge, roof challenge, windows, like some of those things that just really kind of that maybe some of that deferred maintenance that needs to be taken care of, or it could be some code compliance challenges so things that just need to actually take place in order for a tenant to actually move into the space.
So there has to be drywall on the walls and electrical and plumbing, right? And a floor.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, yes. Sure, if there's a small business owner that is willing to take care of some of those things in order to get up and running, I won't assume that a small business owner won't be amenable to that. But that is also a risk, and that is definitely, I think, something again that is a property owner, I think, a responsibility because they're the ones that
Mhm.
own the space.
Right.
But then obviously something to always tell your business owners whatever they're investing in a space, if you're shaking that building and it does not move, it is the building owner's possession at that point,
Mhm.
right? So
Right.
um, just for your small business owners that do not own the building, and that's why I always say you can encourage your small business owners to own the buildings. That's another part of the
Mhm.
important piece, right? Especially things like restaurants, right? There's a lot of equipment investment that stays with the building.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah. Um, okay. I know we're kind of getting to some time here. I will, these next few are kind of foundational also because you all already do a lot of this, but always just wanted to remind that these are some of the 101 things that you are already doing, but always kind of those first steps, right? You've built this strong foundation already. You've started to kind of already look at your ecosystem. I always just wanted to point out that these are just additional tools. We kind of talked about tools in the description. So just wanted to point out that in our education hub, you can also find the toolkit for as you're building that strong ecosystem. That's what's also going to help then build strong entrepreneurs to help be tenants for your property owners. And then, when we think about also that inventory, which is always kind of that first step, right? To understand what that is, we do have the Booms tracker, which a lot of you are using. So that's building opportunities on Main Street tracker. It is a free tool. I know many of you have already started to sign on to this tool, but it is helpful, especially because it is digital, but it helps you all with, again, tracking that either vacant or underutilized space, just collecting data, organizing it, and then being able to present it to folks so that they can kind of map it and see, where are some of the vacancies. There is a 2.0 version that's coming out soon that will also help with business mix. So that's coming soon. But in the end, right now, it's more or less for sort of occupied, unoccupied, and learning a little bit more about ownership and a lot of things that we just talked about. But it'll help with some of that long-term planning, or at least understand a little bit more about where you might want to concentrate first. This was kind of like our way of kind of having a better understanding also about upper story. So when we talk about, vacancy and property ownership, like how do we help property owners really utilize the full building? A lot of it is upper story as well. It's not just that commercial space. So good tool to kind of look at that. So just wanted to point that out. Um, and then finally, really kind of thinking about, again, I always say right sizing resources. And I guess by that, it's more or less, often we start out with things like a facade grant, right? But sometimes what we needed, years ago might not always be what we need today. And not to say that you get rid of a facade grant, but certainly we may need to adjust sort of like our buckets of resources to make sure that if it is the fact that we have now interviewed all of our property owners and we've done our retention meetings and we have found out that the code compliance for X, Y, and Z is the thing that we need, or we found out that, man, they actually really need help with their roofs because that's the thing that's been deferred, then let's put the resources towards the roofs. So how do we, but those are the things that we want to figure out. And then kind of going back to this slide as well, right? We talked about these might be some of the challenges and the things for vacancy in general. And then once we've sort of figured out what are the top 1 to 2 things that are happening within our community, that's the other part about right sizing the resource, right? These are some of the maybe areas of intervention that you can kind of think about. What are some of those tools? So again, going back to the question of ownership, regulatory, financial market, okay, we've asked the questions. now we're sort of looking at here are some of the potential issues that are involved. Um, again, they've inherited it. They have no idea what to do with the building. We have to give them, some inspiration. It's the zoning again, or the codes. Man, it's just a really high risk in terms of like, really making that investment, or there's just not a lot of demand. So what are those things? All right, now we can kind of think of, okay, we really need to make sure that we are offering our property owners the right education and making sure that we're really enforcing the existing codes that are there so that we can really move them into creating the best environment. We really want to examine what we've got currently so that we can really, again, make sure that the environment is if we're creating a very supportive environment. We really want to make sure that we are locating all of the different incentives and opportunities so that we can stack these resources. Also, we really want to make sure that we've got, again, a way to help business owners enter into our market and help them move throughout it. Again, different ways to kind of think about how to help with those tools. So but we have to figure out again the why first and really understand the why. So just I think this is the important piece in order to really again right size some of those resources, um, and really kind of think about uh, how can we make sure that we are creating the correct intervention for whatever that particular factor is. And then I think that again, we go back to, all right, now how do we start to build that sort of like toolkit? Often we're pretty good again at doing that for our small business owners. But again, it's starting to translate that over also to our property owners and what that might look like. I mean, and again, this is not an inclusive list by any means. But I think that for property owners, that might look like, again, more about zoning and permitting and how how supportive you can be for them in those areas. I think it's great to again be so much more explicit about what it is that you are looking for in your downtown. Position maybe your community strategic plan or your downtown strategic plan, or again that wish list, so that they can see it and they know it and that they can hopefully buy into it. For business owners, again, financial support, networking, mentoring, education. Go back to even the entrepreneurial ecosystem, list of things and kind of start to go down that and say, what are some of those resources within all of those factors that we have, and make it very clear and visible for both of these folks to see, make sure that there is also among your service providers, so your um, service providers and your entrepreneur service providers, that there is no wrong door that they're entering, because that they're going to talk to who they feel comfortable with, right? Whether it is your municipality, it's yourself, maybe it's your economic development or your chamber, that you're all on the same page about some of these things. And then of course, like, how do you make sure that if you're leading them to the next person in that handoff, that it's a good solid handoff. So how do you start to work on those some things as well, as a resource? So just some other things to kind of think about. But I think that this really helps you all as Main Streeters move from just to really be seen as the folks that kind of are helping with this particular part of the vitality of your downtown district. So in the end, we always want to make sure that we're getting to kind of that shared action piece. And I just want to leave room for like any other questions. So, how do we just get from that conversation again to like the collaboration? I think that these are maybe just some other ways that you
Mhm.
can also get there. Uh, Roundtables, right? Whether it's sort of like and you may already be doing a lot of these things, because I know that we you all at Missouri Main Street always preach a lot of this. So, uh, business owner, but also property owner roundtables. How do you do those, the inventory walks? Maybe it is again about that upper story. Maybe that's that activation, that piece, and you want to concentrate on that. So let's really focus in on that inventory or a little bit of a study there. Maybe you're talking about pop-ups or other pilot models. So how do you, really kind of focus in on those pieces? Maybe you're trying to put together a recruitment packet or some kind of broker tour so that folks kind of know what it is around the area that's available. So those, I think the tools, you want to not just have like isolated conversations in the end. You really want to make sure that you're having all of these conversations again with all of the folks that you want to be working on this with. So I just encourage that you all start to think about maybe one or two simple things, like again,
Mhm.
either a recurring roundtable or a shared like available property strategy or whatever that might be. Just think about like one thing that you might want to have, something that can be like a regular collaboration. I think that will really help start to like lower some barriers. And again, how can you make some of these things much more transparent? How can you make it more explicit? I think that that would be, something that could really, really help with just more intentional, like recruitment practices, right? So that people all can start to buy into sort of a similar vision.
So let's
And
stop
then,
right there if you go back
yeah,
just a second,
of course.
because there's a question related to this, and I also wrote it down.
Yeah.
A lot of times we do meet more with business owners because they're sometimes helping us plan. Maybe it's a sidewalk sale or a wine walk or things that definitely benefit them as business owners, but don't necessarily do things related to property owners. And so I had written down, and then Carolina from Joplin chimed in the same thing. How do we engage property owners? Are you familiar of any, like the EV committee having an annual fun gathering to build relationships? Maybe it's a potluck or a cookout. Do you know of any communities that have done that, something similar to that? I'm
Um,
familiar with yeah, let's get the property owners together for an annual meeting or quarterly meeting and we just talk to them, but I love the fun part of it.
Yeah, I think fun is probably best if you have
Hmm.
like a neighborhood restaurant or some or even a neighborhood tavern or something
Hmm.
that people just like to get. I think keep it casual is
Right.
probably the best thing. And honestly, the intentionality of just having the space for them alone
Hmm.
usually does the trick. I know that seems so simple, but if you just call it out as this is just for you, most of the time that's the part that's like the one thing that they didn't even know that you were doing
Hmm.
something that special for them, right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
I think that that's just such a good start in the end. And you'd be surprised, I guess, like how many. And then, of course, that it's consistent because
Hmm.
sometimes people just have to catch on. So start
Right.
with your low-hanging fruit, the ones that are probably always going to say yes anyway.
Right. Right. Well, I think it's like
Yeah.
building an entrepreneurial ecosystem too. And I think that, usually those are at a tavern, in the evening, you gather those folks together. And it's fine to have a little bit of programming related to it. But you do want to keep it on the fun side of letting them also network and meet their neighbors and talk to them because that's where things happen too. Um, but like the idea of gathering them annually, maybe quarterly, I think would be better. And sharing the vision of the Main Street program. These are the goals that we're working towards. This is our transformation strategy. These are the things that we're doing because I don't think they get as much communication as probably business owners do.
No, they really don't in the end. Or they're not as in tune with it, right? Because
Hmm.
it really isn't their everyday sometimes, as
Right.
much as maybe a business owner's every
Right,
day.
right,
Yeah.
right. I
So
just want to
yeah.
remind folks, put questions you have in the chat or in the Q&A, and I think you have some action items, Joy, in the next slide.
Yeah, yeah. And this will be my last slide too. So yes, next 30 days, again, just some thoughts for you to think about. Like, again, just based off all this, I know I kind of threw quite a lot at you today. But I think when we are really thinking about building those stronger property owners, business owners, and building those relationships in general, we don't have to think about a huge program at first, just what are, again, some of those incremental steps, those consistent actions that we can take? What is that one challenge or one opportunity that you feel that your district is really facing, or what have you found from your already existing surveys that you've already sent out and some of the conversations that you've already had that need to be strengthened this year, especially when it comes to like relationships. And if you have not asked like a relationship-based question, maybe that's where you're starting. Maybe that's the next question that you might want to ask on your next survey. Or who can maybe lead some of this BRE or business retention expansion kind of effort, right? And I guess I really mean this because your economic development might already be doing something similar to this. They just might be doing it for some of your larger employers and not always concentrating maybe on some of your small businesses. So how are you, again, maybe translating that into your district? So again, what tools or partnerships can you really leverage, and how can you start kind of tracking those things right now? I just think that this would be a good way to just start. So it's
Mhm.
just simple things that you can start with in the next 30 days. Yeah, I just think that that would be great. But yeah, thank you so much for just having this conversation and having this space to sort of talk about those two pieces, and have a deeper dive into building those relationships. I think this was very important.
Great. Joy, we talk about this quite a bit, is that as a Main Street program, we don't have to know it all. We don't have to do all the things. And so I think it's the same thing in this relationship with property owners and business owners is how can we be the connector person? If a property owner is having some issues with, the codes department, okay, let's get them together. Let's bring them together and let's talk through it. Codes has a purpose, and the building owner has, thoughts. And so let's bring them together and have the conversation. So being a connector, but also educating property owners on good practices. We're doing a workshop in Excelsior Springs in May where we're bringing in a gentleman that's going to teach property owners and contractors how to fix wood windows, and how to repair masonry. And so, as Main Street, we can bring folks in that can help educate them on it. Again, we don't have to be everything to everyone, but if we can connect and educate, I think those are the things that we do best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think I've filtered this through the whole presentation, but as we know, things move at the speed of trust.
Yep. Yep.
That's the whole thing about relationships, right?
Yep.
So I think that we just have to remember that that's what we're building
Hmm.
when we are building those relationships and why it's so important. So,
Yep. Yep.
again, yeah, very important
Okay.
part.
Okay. We just have a couple more minutes. So if you have a question, pop them in there. But Joy, we do have one about how do you entice building owners and business owners to come to meetings?
Yeah.
Tell them you're going to raise their taxes.
Oh gosh, yes, taxes, the four-letter word. Yeah,
Yes.
I think maybe that is also another carrot and stick situation, right? I think again, most of the time you want to be there to either be listening to them about something, or maybe you're there to educate them on something, even if it's something that you've had happening in your community for a long time. You'd be surprised how a lot of folks maybe are not aware. So I would say bring them in, offer food and, a
And
little bit of
and
booze. I don't know.
yeah,
Refresh.
hosted in a building that's vacant. People love to see the
Mhm.
inside of buildings they used to be able to go into. So that can be
Yeah.
another way to entice them, make it exciting. And I think you said it, Joy, is that you have to keep repeating it. You're not going to get
Yeah.
everybody every time, and it takes a little bit of time to get into people's minds that hey, we're doing this, and maybe I should participate.
Make it
Um,
definitely recurring too.
yep.
Yeah, because it's not something that folks definitely you're right, will not have heard it the first time, and you would be surprised how much people need to know that it's happening over and over again
Hmm.
before they come the first time.
Right. Right. Lacey and Jackson. No, Lacey in oh, I'm got Kirksville, is looking for sample vacancy ordinances. I know we have St. Clair and Raytown, but do you have any examples?
Yeah, I do have a couple. There was one in particular that just got launched here in kind of south western Illinois. I'm happy to send that one over as well.
You remember the
Um,
town? They could go
it
look it up
was
themselves also.
Wood River,
Wood
Illinois.
River, Illinois.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Okay.
actually they took it one step further. So, and I'm not sure if this is. They took it one step further, so it's not just the vacancy ordinance, but I believe that it is also they are discouraging that the use of storage.
Hmm.
So they are not allowed to use that first floor as storage either.
Yeah, I think the ones we've been promoting and focusing on in Missouri, you have to have a business license. It has to be open to the public is part of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And also, Missouri Municipal League would be a good resource to go tap into and ask for examples too. Okay, one more question, real quick. If multiple vendors go into the same building, but one business collects the sales tax, does that count as multiple businesses or just one?
Oh. Um, if it's only one person collecting, then it's usually underneath that one tax ID. So I feel
Hmm.
like that's just the one business. And usually it's that one business that then is cutting whatever that rent check is to that one property owner. And we
Hmm.
have actually seen that be a pretty good model to help also encourage like fostering entrepreneurship so that
Hmm.
hopefully those multiple businesses then kind of like, get strong enough to sort of, blossom into their own spaces.
Yeah, and I think we look at it. We've had that question asked too for the quarterly economic data that is submitted to us. It's kind of based it on business license too. So there's probably just one business license for that building. And so you treat it that way. But then co-working spaces can have multiple businesses in there, each with their own business license. So those would be counted each individually if they have a business license. So
Mhm.
you kind of have to define how that works. But if you have questions about that for your reporting, just reach out to myself or Ben and we can help you with that.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I think that's the end of the questions, Joy. I appreciate always spending time with you and look forward to seeing you in Tulsa, along with hopefully lots of other folks on the Zoom today. See you in Tulsa for the National Main Street Conference.
sounds good.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Joy.
Thanks.
Bye bye.